Hello, hi, it's Edward.
Hey, Edward, it's Ammon.
Yeah, good. How you doing? I'm just
I'm all
gonna turn
right.
my video on. Sorry about
Yep,
any confusion.
there we go. That's okay. I was sitting on the Google Hangout and I don't think it even knew it was me. So
All right, right. Let me just.
apologies for that.
Good, good. How's first of all, how's your health?
Good, good. Still, you hear a little throat clearing and whatnot, but for the most part, I'm pretty much 98%.
90, 98%. And your wife?
She's good. She had it more acutely and she was over it much more quickly. I had it
Right.
mild and just sort of kept going for a while there. It's no fun, but
Incredible.
I'm hopefully we're done with it.
Yeah, immune. So, any advice for people that are kind of worried about it, going through it, or coming out of it?
I made sure to stay really, really hydrated, drank tons and tons of water. Um, Took a bunch of electrolytes, took a bunch of like basically anything I could do to keep my immune system going. But I think it's luck of the draw. There's not much you can do. Um, and you just pay attention to what your lungs are feeling and if they're getting worse or better. Around day 6 or so is usually where you turn a corner for better or worse, apparently.
Okay.
I've been reading a
Excellent. Well,
lot.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think we've all become scientists in the last few weeks, and
Yeah,
it's almost like overwhelming. It's like most things, no matter where you look, you find the answer you're looking for, which is
yeah.
maybe not healthy.
I saw a graph that looked like this, and it was titled "The Time I've Spent Looking at Exponential Curves."
Yeah, that's very clever. Yeah, I guess obviously I've known you guys for many years. You've been around since when were you founded?
This next week is our 6-year anniversary.
Absolutely. So I guess probably, I mean, being blunt, you're ahead of the curve with everything you've been doing, which is a good thing and a bad thing
Yeah.
sometimes. What are you seeing in the marketplace now that kind of ties in with what you've been trying to do?
Well, there's a couple of things that we've seen. Our signups have gone up substantially, and I think that people are really looking for ways to manage meetings virtually. Because you can't pop your head into the office next door and say, "Hey, is 3 o'clock good?" Okay, great. Um, and we actually just published a blog post a little while ago regarding the percentage of virtual meetings, and as you might expect, we were around 70% or so, and it's gone up. Now it's close to 95, 96% of all meetings scheduled through x.ai are virtual. And it happened quickly over the course of just a couple of days there in mid-March.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very keen to hear your perspective, but what I mean, we set up the beacons with one thing in mind, and the idea was to shorten the gap between what was possible technology wise and what's actually kind of mainstream. And what we were seeing was that in things like cloud adoption of cloud, adoption of robotic automation, it was probably about 15 years between what is possible and what's actually mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And we were thinking, even if you start chopping away at that kind of for a year, 2 years, then that you're making a difference. So our goal was to kind of make it easier for people to be aware of what was possible. But then this happens, and overnight people switch from we don't do video meetings, well, we do them, but we don't turn on the video. And suddenly behaviors on the internet have changed like instantaneously, faster and more
Yeah.
widespread than anything that's ever happened in the internet. And it's phenomenal. So maybe people are more open to adoption of new ideas, or maybe they've got the time for it. I don't know. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
So, you know, uh, I think that people are a little bit surprised at how how easy it actually is to be remote, but also how difficult it is to be remote because
Yep.
it's a shift in a couple of different ways. Um, our company has been remote for over a year now, and we made the transition from not being remote to being remote, and we found that you know, it's a struggle to maintain those interpersonal office relationships.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's a struggle to maintain sort of your own work-life balance because
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
they're completely intertwined. But we also found that as long as everyone's sort of on the same page and everyone's abiding by the same rules, then you can really work much more efficiently and effectively asynchronously. And for a company that schedules a lot of meetings, we don't have that many meetings. We have a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
quick sidebar conversations, where if a Slack conversation is going more than just a couple of messages, it's like, hey, let's just jump on a call real quick, and then we do one of these. But yeah, I think people are a little bit shocked at how their job that absolutely cannot be done remotely absolutely can be done remotely.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think, the banking world, for example, is waking up to that. These bankers that felt they had to be at a desk, 7:30 till 6. Now it turns out they don't, and yes, there's infrastructure issues and, call recording and, compliance issues to still be aware of, but
Yeah.
do they have to be there? And but there was two things that I emerging in my thinking in the last year or so. One was the death of the 40-hour working week.
Yep.
And I think it's probably died a long time ago, but we were still expected to be at work 9 to 5, broadly speaking. And again, that creates boundaries which have disappeared. Now it seeps into our weekends or nights. So that was probably there already, but the FaceTime element of it, the fact you had to be seen to be at your desk, 9 to 5 or whatever the hours were, that feels like it could be dead now.
Well, there is sort of this idea of there's still FaceTime, where if you're sending and responding to Slack messages, then you're engaged, you're there.
You're working.
But you're right. The 40-hour work week to me is really suboptimal no matter what, because if you're limiting yourself to 8 hours a day, that time frame is either a constraint or a stretch goal of actually being productive. So, you might have only 5 hours of work to do one day, and then you sit around looking at the clock for 3 hours, or you have 12 hours of work to do one day and you cut it short at 8 hours. And neither one is optimal from an employee or an employer perspective.
Yeah.
And so what we found is that we actually shortened our work day from the hours of, I want to say it's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that's a really short work day, but it's actually not our work day per se. It's what we call our overlap hours. And those are the hours in which feel free to schedule a meeting with people. You're expected to at least be online unless you let everyone know, hey, I got to run out to the store or whatever you're doing.
Hey.
And so that gives us this core time within the day where it's a 4-hour window that everyone overlaps. So the early morning risers overlap at the end of their day. Other people can sleep in till 10 and then, overlap at the beginning of their day. But what you learn really quickly is that you can sort of have all of your synchronization with your team in that block, and then you have a big chunk of time from 2 to whenever you want to finish working to really focus on getting things done. And that doesn't mean you can't have meetings outside of that window.
Yeah.
But that's been really helpful for our team.
So who suggested that idea? Was that something you came up with internally as an idea, or was it something you read about or saw someone else doing?
A little from column A, a little from column B. We went through a pretty drawn out months-long process. We called it How We Work. And we would, initially we all sat down and shared ideas, and we'd read blog posts. We have a blog post about the process that we went through on our site at x.ai.
Yeah, we'll share that with people, obviously.
Yeah. And, we just made suggestions, and then we would have retros. So every week initially, and then every 2 weeks, and then every month or so, we would sit down and say, okay, what worked and what didn't? The idea of being online from 9 to 5 just wasn't really working, especially for some of our engineers, because they need time to sit and focus. And so a lot of it was trial and error, but we sort of laid the groundwork by just reading as much as we possibly could about how other companies made this switch.
Well, fascinating, because I always struggle with the concept of 9 to 5, because I know there's some days that I'm mentally done by 2 o'clock, and I'm actually probably more of a morning person, so therefore I'd probably rather get into the office if there was one at 6 and finish at 12 and be productive. But then somehow you're gonna, that is not kind of accepted, in terms of office social kind of perspective.
Yeah.
So I always struggled with the concept, but also, suddenly at 9 o'clock you've got to be productive, and at 5 o'clock you stop being productive. That's the rules, and you go, well, it's just not how my brain works or humans work. So that's fascinating. So in terms of, you've kind of dealt with FaceTime that way, so you basically accepted you have to be FaceTime or whatever the words are, available time, set times. And there's flexibility either way. So that's kind of pretty key rules.
Yeah, the overlap hours have been really good for us as a team. And then, I'm the same as you. I'm not a 9 to 5 person. I don't operate on that schedule. And so, sometimes after I put my kids to bed, I'll sit down and I'll be incredibly productive until midnight, which is probably not healthy, but
Yeah.
it's what I do. And our team and our company is very open and transparent about the fact that we have lives outside of work. And so, at noon, someone might say, "Hey, run into a dentist appointment." Great. "Hey, gonna go pick my kids up. I'll be offline." And you just let people know that's what you're doing. And there's no stigma attached to the idea that you have a life to manage in addition to your work, as long as you're getting everything done. And at the beginning of each week, we sit down and have across the entire team sits down and says, "Okay, here's what we're working on this week." And as long as you get that done, as long as you deliver what you need to deliver and the company is doing well, we don't care what hours you're working. As long as you're available within that overlap to the largest degree possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the one thing I never thought would work online, but I'm sure is working, is the whole kind of the brainstorming. The way I would say the old days, but the old days you get in a room and you'd just have a chunk of time and you'd have an idea or a concept you want to talk through, and you brainstorm ideas, and collectively you'd come to what you assumed was a good outcome with plans and actions. Have you done that online, or do you keep that for face to face?
So that is one thing that I will admit is you do lose. It becomes harder to do things like that. You can't just sort of pop your head up over your monitor and say, "Hey, I just thought of something." And then you just sort of banter it back and forth, do a little spitballing. You sort of have to plan those a little bit. But we do some online brainstorming. And it's usually, "Hey, I've created a document. Everyone go in there and just add some crazy ideas. And we use Google Docs quite frequently as a collaboration platform. So everyone can just go in and add comments, add ideas, bullet points, and then we'll sit down on a Google Meet or a Zoom call, whatever the case may be, and just start talking through them. And you can get some inspiration there, but it's a little bit more pre-planned inspiration than it is spontaneous. And so you just have to sort of accept that that's the reality of it then.
Yeah, because I always miss that kind of accidental, cliche water cooler conversation. But when you just go to have lunch with someone, you suddenly start talking, and suddenly the conversation goes in a randomly different direction. I've always missed that in terms of working remotely or working on your own. And do you see that's when you get together once a quarter, once a month, just to do that, or have you totally done away with that?
No, so we instituted something we call Project Airbnb, which is our last one was in Puerto Rico. We did one in Miami, where we'll just get an Airbnb for a week, and everyone gets a couple $100 stipend to fly in. And those are incredibly useful sort of offsites for everyone to gather together and have those types of sidebar conversations it's a very relaxed setting, but intense in the sense that you're interacting constantly with your colleagues, and really that's when a lot of those ideas flow.
And also you're getting to know each other on a different level,
Yes.
Which is always valuable, for the good or the bad, I guess. But so because one of the, when you looked at this, you think, okay, in a year's time, everyone's working from home a lot more. We're all going to need an extra room in our house to accommodate, maybe even our kids, an extra room for them to do their work. But then, look at the commercial office space, maybe needing less of that going forward, because, people are more relaxed about not having to be in the office. But I always wondered, how do bigger organizations, more, older, I guess a legacy, what the right word is, but older organizations, how do they move to that kind of more looser model where it's focused on outputs, not, inputs in terms of your 9 to 5 input, and what's your advice and what you've seen?
It's tough. So I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who's been in startup land for a very long time. So I've worked at larger organizations, at Google years ago and other places like that. But I think that sadly there's going to be sort of a reckoning in that if a large legacy is the wrong word, I agree,
Yeah,
but
yeah, 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 yeah.
a large company.
More established, more
Yeah,
structured. Yeah,
yeah, they're set in your ways. And should they decide to go remote, I think there's going to be a little bit of a reckoning with the realization that there's some jobs that are just not that productive and not necessarily needed.
yeah,
And then there's some people who just don't take well to remote work. They sort of need that social interaction that some office jobs bring, or
yeah,
they
yeah.
need a little
Or
bit.
even just the discipline of well, work and home, which I totally get. I mean, yeah. So these are not necessarily criticisms; they're just kind of like behavioral facts that we all have to deal
Yeah,
with.
yeah,
Yeah,
and some people just are not really programmed to do the remote thing. I think this is a forced reprogramming, and
yeah,
it may actually be a good thing that people learn to build a new routine, because companies are going to be incredibly forgiving during a pandemic of as everyone makes this adjustment. Whereas prior, if I said, "Hey, I'm going to start working remotely," and I'm not very productive, then I'm easy to replace quickly.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I always thought the one person I'd love to talk to about this whole thing is Marissa Meyer
yeah,
from Yahoo to see if she's regretting anything. And I get where she was coming from with that. But the point is, you just think that you can't in the modern world,
yeah,
whether it's a crash economy or a boom economy, be rigid when people are not. People recognize that they're, the world is fluid. You're meant to be checking your emails late at night or over the weekend. You're meant to be contactable. So there's going to be a give and take in this, and I think we're moving to a world that is potentially very exciting and very, very empowering in terms of being able to go to drop your kids off more easily, less stressed about, well, what if we're 5 minutes late for a meeting because there was a traffic jam,
yeah,
and accepting. And I think also the other thing I found about the adoption of video is that suddenly you're inviting people into your homes. I mean, you watch Fox, BBC, CNN, and people are broadcasting. Specialists are broadcasting from their homes, and you're in their homes. And just like what was it, 6 months ago? There was that video of the BBC guy
yeah.
broadcasting from Hong Kong, and yeah, exactly. And that was kind of pilloried at the time. That was kind of a joke, but actually now you say, okay, that's just life. The guy's
Oh
got
yeah,
a family. He's
yeah,
human. And I think that's how we're going to bond a lot more, because we're inviting people into our homes, into our real lives. And I mean, shock horror, your CEO has to go to the dentist, or shock horror, your admin assistant, I don't,
yeah.
is stuck in a traffic jam. We're all humans now. I feel like we're just crossed this boundary that maybe we all get more understanding.
Yeah,
Um,
there's sort of a built-in leniency on whether or not something is urgent. If
yeah,
because now we're working more asynchronously, if I send you a message, I'm not necessarily expecting an answer immediately. Within the next hour or so, you'll probably get back to me, and you realize that a lot of things that absolutely could not wait before, well, they can wait. You can go do other things. But with you mentioned the child crawling in behind the guy on the BBC show. In our blog post about how we made the shift to remote work, the lead image is a screenshot of one of our meetings, and my 6-year-old son's head is like right up over my shoulder. They'll just pop in and they'll say, "Hey kids, how you doing? How's it going? Back to work." And you're right. There becomes very much sort of a leniency around the fact that your life is now intertwined with your work, and it's no big deal if
yeah.
there's kids running around in the background or anything else.
Well, I think it's a stage. I think it's actually more. It's almost like a coming out, because it's everyone was probably suspecting your kids. Probably you were suppressing them, keeping them ignored. You were had the door locked. Everyone probably suspected that. But now it's, well, I'm out. I do have kids. Like it's kind of I'm human. I'm real. And it is like, and it opens boundaries, especially when you start. I mean, with your colleagues, you know each other already, but when you're starting to create new relationships online,
Yeah,
and you are human, and it's like going for lunch with someone for the first time. You're suddenly able to talk about things, or letting people into your lives in a way that you can't do in a kind of formal meeting. And I think this is one of the most exciting developments of all, is that suddenly you can be you'd be building relationships online. Again, this is like a dating proposition, and as ever, the dating world is years ahead of the real world. But that whole concept of the business world can follow many of the principles.
it's
And
literally a window into someone else's life, because I have Zoom open in a window right now.
yeah, yeah,
But you're right. That sort of interpersonal interaction that you have in an office setting is usually a little more superficial than other types of interactions, like when you go to lunch with someone and then you really get to know them. But this is sort of right off the bat, you're looking at, I see that you're in your bedroom, you have a canopy bed, and I'm here with in a rocking chair, and you sort of get a different view of people, and it's a different kind of instant rapport building.
Yeah.
That it's really pleasant. And that's one of the reasons that we have a rule that video is on. I don't care if you haven't showered in 3 days, we're all humans. Let's just turn on the video, because there's a lot of sort of nuanced communication that happens when you're talking. That video really enhances that. And if you're not using video on your calls, you're missing out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were doing the transition, what went wrong? What would you what were your biggest lessons of what went wrong?
Well, trying to stick with a 9-to-5 schedule was one of our biggest mistakes. Because like you said, constant availability, a lot of people are just working all the time anyway. So 9 to 5 becomes just sort of an abstraction. It's not a real thing. So figuring out the overlap hours was a big thing for us. The notion of asynchronicity was another one where, I really want to finish this document today. Why is no one responding to me? It's like, well, you're not going to get this done until the end of the day. And making sure that you're setting those expectations in advance. Like, hey guys, I want to be able to ship this by the end of the day today. Could you jump into the document and make sure that you're giving me your feedback and markup like within the next hour or two? And if somebody comes back and says, I'm not going to be able to get to that today, then your expectations are now set, and you're not expecting that instant feedback, because there's no more sitting down side by side and just looking at the same computer screen and going through things. But also, we learned that having a bias towards a quick call over a Slack conversation is also very useful. So, we might
a quick video call.
Yeah. So say, hey, we found this issue with this one customer. Let's take a look at it. You know what? This is going to be too much to do over text. Let's call. So you jump on a quick video call, but then summarizing that afterwards also becomes really important, because that's part of the transparency that we strive for as a team. So I might jump on a call with our head of support to diagnose a customer issue. Then afterwards, we'll summarize it really quickly in Slack so that it's memorialized in the never-ending. But that way, anyone else looking at that conversation doesn't see it just stop. They see that we jumped on a call, and then they see the results of that call. And so the knowledge share.
That's a good one generally, but it's a good one to embed in there.
Yeah, because if I'm in an open office environment having that conversation, everyone else can kind of overhear it and go, oh, there's a customer issue. Okay, that's noted. But when it's just me and one other person on a Slack call, nobody else can overhear that, except maybe on Zoom. And so, summarizing those little sidebar conversations has been really useful, because then other people are going, hey, what was the result of this? What was the outcome here? And so that sort of transparency becomes important as well. And when one individual team is having a meeting, we have a Slack channel for just posting the link for the video call, and anyone's welcome to join. So we do that so that, A, no one feels left out, but B, if someone feels like they have something to contribute, even if they're not on that team, they can just join in. And so it becomes more of an open environment where anyone who wants to be involved in any conversation can be, unless it's, a very private nature conversation. But, we have a bias towards public Slack channels over direct messages. And making all of our meetings public within the company. And that really gives you more points of interaction publicly and across the entire team than you would have otherwise.
Well, I guess, just to close off, it feels like the common theme is just transparency, this kind of move to a real openness, a real transparency that's, transparent about what you're thinking at work, what you have to deal with in your personal life, who's going to pop in and jump over your shoulder, and just, and that seems to be almost the common theme, is this willingness and openness and acceptance of just the value that transparency gives you.
Yeah. And, fostering a culture in which no one is scared to mention that they're going to be offline for 2 hours because they have a parent-teacher conference or something like that. Fostering that sort of acceptance of those things becomes really important, because the last thing you want is someone to feel like they're shirking their responsibilities and that they have to hide that fact. from others. And so constant check-ins and transparency helps everyone be on the same page. Everyone understands that, you know, get your work done, get finished what you say you're going to finish at the beginning of the week, by the end of the week. And then at the end of the week, we have a demo day where everyone is expected to present something of what they did that week. And I don't care what hour of the day you did it, as long as it's done. You know, finish what you committed to and make sure that everyone knows what you're up to at any given time. And, you know, it's a paradigm shift, but it's very doable. And I think so many people are thrust into this position now that they'll figure it out pretty quickly, because there's people like our company that learned from other companies that did the same thing and, you know, have evolved this process of moving from online to offline.
Well, I think transparency and doable, they're probably the two key words that are key from this conversation. So I'll get the link to that blog post posted alongside this video. Anything else you want to share with me that I'll just put it onto the link. Obviously, I'll put a link to x.ai on the website.
Just there's a component of this that's very much being able to separate work and life. And it's, again, we talked about those overlap hours and those sorts of things, but, you know, when you're working, you're working. When you're, you know, being a dad or going about your life, you're going about your life. But what you find is that it's not contiguous blocks. You really have to sort of shift contexts multiple times throughout the day, especially now that everybody's homeschooling their kids.
Yeah.
And so being comfortable with that, with the sort of commingling where I'm not going to sit down and work for 5 hours straight. I'm going to work for an hour here and then 20 minutes doing other things and so on and so forth. So building a comfort level with that, it becomes important, but also having a separate space, like a physical space to do work in. Like I'm hiding in an attic right now for a little bit of peace and quiet, but cordoning that off from the rest of your life where you sit and watch TV or go about your hobbies is also just sort of a mental switch that helps you go from work mode to home mode. And I wrote a little bit about that in a separate blog post. But we also encourage our employees to get themselves a co-working space, and we make available a stipend. So if you want to, and obviously during a pandemic, that's not much of an option, but if you want to, you can go into a WeWork, for instance. So you can get yourself a desk somewhere that's, you know, and so you can maintain that sort of leave your home, go to an office, leave that office, go back home if you want. Most people work from home. A lot of our employees work from coffee shops from time to time just for a change of scenery. But that gives somewhat of a semblance of that, you know, that division between work and home. And, you know, if you need that change of venue to have that delineation, great. Otherwise, just stay home and make a lot of those little shifts throughout the day.
Yeah, no, excellent. All right, well, I appreciate your time on this whole thing. It's fascinating time to, you know, it's a scary time in many ways. It's fascinating. And you just kind of, I do think there's the chance to put things in place now that will be with us forever. So that's the positive opportunity.
You know, I think shaking hands and hugs, hello, are probably out the window at this point permanently. But yeah, I think that the nature of work, what you said at the beginning here about the acceleration of what's technologically possible and what's practical, the compression of the time between the two is astounding. And I think that we'll see lasting effects from this move to online.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate your time.